Hello, this is Corey Durbin, CEO of SHARx, and this is the Rising Tides podcast. Each week, I have the privilege of speaking with influential athletes about their rise to fame, the dedication to their sport, and what it takes to be successful. Let's dive in. I am with my good friend and PGA and Champions Tour professional, longtime professional, and SHARx brand ambassador, Gary Hallberg. Gary, how are you today, my friend?
I'm well, Corey. I'm up in the Midwest right now, and the weather's gotten nice. It's 70 degrees during the day and cool at night. So really great to be up here visiting my family.
Well, you're up in Chicago, probably not just to visit your family, because I heard you might have gotten inducted into the Illinois Junior Golf Hall of Fame the other day.
Yeah, that was pretty unexpected. It was grew up playing junior golf in Illinois, and they had a great program. A lot of young kids. I had a couple of guys that I used to, duke it out with. And we made each other better golfers when we were 12, 13, 14. And so they have a great program up here. And boy, that was how many years ago? That was over 50 years ago. And they still remembered me, which was very nice of them. And it was a good thing. Really.
Yeah, somehow in the blink of an eye, we wake up. It's like, whoa, 50 years have passed. But because you started playing professional golf, I think 1983. But I love the story you've told me about your first high school golf tournament. I think it was your first one. And I would imagine you might have shared it at the Illinois Junior Golf Hall of Fame. And yeah, would you care to share a little bit about your first experience in competitive golf?
Yeah, it's funny, you think back on our lives, your life, and most people can reflect. Some people don't want to reflect, but in my case, in this case with golf, what was a turning point? What made me think, what, maybe I should do this and keep at it. I was a freshman in high school. I weighed 98 pounds. The reason I know that I wrestled 98 pounds. So, I got on the scale, all the time. So I tried out for the golf team, and we had one guy that was 6'8" on the basketball team, big man, huge. And he was over 300 pounds. I was 98 pounds. You imagine standing next to him, And then the other guys on the team were juniors and seniors. Well, I played pretty good in the qualifier, so I got a spot in the biggest tournament of the year, and left out one of the seniors, and the guys weren't happy about it. They're like, "Look at this skinny little twerp, coach. You can't make him play with us, a freshman." He goes, "Guys, he beat you. I gotta go with him." So we went to the tournament, and it was a terrible day. I think it was 45 degrees. And the wind was howling, and it was raining and sleeting. It was one of those days, you don't want to go out.
Springtime in Chicago, right?
Huh?
Springtime in Chicago, basically.
Right. You run to your car, and, you're freezing, and I had to go play golf in that. I didn't have any body fat either. But anyway, after the round, came in, and there were about almost 200 players that were playing. And my one pal was the first to me. He said, "I'm leader in the clubhouse, and you're the last group." And I said, "What'd you shoot?" He said, I'm the only guy to break 80 today out of 200 guys. It was that hard of a day. It was impossible. And these are good players, really good high school kids. And what'd you shoot? I said, "Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I think it was pretty good though." And so we came in, and I shot a 69. So I beat the field by 10 shots. They're all like, "Wow, is it? Wait, that can't be right." And the guys I played with told him, "Yeah, no, he did. I was hitting like driver off the deck 6 feet from the hole, into the howling winds." But yeah, that was a big turning, point in my life. It was all of a sudden I was accepted, I was appreciated, on my team, instead of like, the opposite, right? Bullying. The bullying stopped. Let me just say that at that time.
Well, you gained those guys' respect pretty quickly, didn't you? After that day.
Yeah, no, now I'm one of the guys, versus, a total outcast. But yeah, it was great. And then from there on, I just, when you have early success at anything, you get hooked on it, and you try it again, and you try and do better. And so it just kept getting better for me, all the way I got on the tour, crazy.
You had a day like that on the tour also, if I recall, and it was in the British Open. Nasty weather day, and I don't know if that was the 91 Open. I think maybe you had a lead there after 36 holes. Maybe it wasn't that event, but I'd love to. I think that you could relay that story.
Well, I think all the tour players, guys that have played professionally, have a few rounds that were just like, what happened there? That was incredible. And you'd like to duplicate it, but it seems to not happen. But I would say my best couple rounds, yeah, definitely it was the senior British Open at Turnberry, and the average for that day was 77.9 was the average score for the field, which 156 players. It was 20 knot winds, 49 degrees, and raining again. I don't know why I like that weather in golfing. You really shouldn't, but I shot a 63 that day, so it's like 15 shots better than the average score for the field, and it was
Wow.
yeah, again, one of those things. 150 yards, into the hole. My 4-iron normally goes 210. I take a 4-iron out, from 150, and knock it in there 4 feet, make the putt. Kind of some weird stuff, right? So yeah, I guess you could say I was in the zone, and I was kind of floating, and everything was just going exactly how, I was hoping, it to go.
It felt like another Chicago day, probably back in the springtime, right? So it.
Yeah, I've always been a little skinny. Maybe when I put 8 layers of clothes on, it kind of tightens me up and I play better or something like that,
Well, I recall you telling me that Tom Watson walked into the locker room that day and had a few kind words for you after that round.
Yeah, he was very gracious, to come up to me and say some really positive, awesome things about my round, and he played Turnberry, the big match. Remember Jack and Tom at Turnberry, but yeah, he was said, that was, he couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. The guys were like, is that right? It's got to be a misprint. There was a mistake on the board. And I'm like, no, it really did happen. So
He
yeah,
called it one of the finest rounds he'd ever seen. Is that correct?
yeah, one of the best rounds of golf. Yeah, it was.
That's awesome. Well, I've had the privilege of meeting you through my club up here at our member pro event, and you and I have a little connection because I spent some time my freshman year at Wake Forest, and of course you were 4-time All-American at Wake Forest and Arnold Palmer Scholarship. And so, as you look back at at your time, how did you end up at Wake, and what was it like having? I think you were the first time 4-time All-American in NCAA history, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. Well, there's first, second, third team, and honorable mention. I made the first team All-American 4 straight years, and no one had ever done that to date up till then, which was, I didn't think about it. I just went out and played golf, and I got selected every year, which was amazing, really. But I went to that was the scholarship everybody wanted, right? To go to Wake Forest. They'd won the NCAA the year prior, and they were really a powerhouse golf team. And the coach was the real deal. He was very old school. And when I say old school, you can imagine, what they were like. He wasn't gonna. When my dad dropped me off there, he said, "Make a man out of him." And he smiled. He shook his head. I'm like, "Oh, this can't be good." Right? But yeah, he made sure that we became the best that we could be. And he didn't care if you hated him. He didn't care about it. There was nothing nice about it. You're going to be the best golfer in person you can be at the end of the 4 years. That's what I'm here for. That's my job. You don't have to like me. I don't care. And yeah, he was very, very brutal at times. One story that the guys before me told me this story. This was the generation, before. So one player comes off the 18 or I think he came off the 9th green, and it was a cold day, 50 degrees, and coach was holding a cup of coffee in his hand, and those styrofoam cups, he's holding coffee and he's smoking a cigarette in his other hand. Player comes off the green, and that coffee was steaming coming out of the top of that cup, And he said, "What'd you shoot?" And the player's like, "Coach, I was 1 over par." He looked at him, took that cup, and he just squeezed the cup. And all that coffee, that it just scalded him. And he never cringed. He just stared at the player. "We're going to do better on the back nine, aren't we?" And the player's like, "Yes, coach." And walked off.
That's old school.
That's old school, right? He would kick the bed, and underneath the bed, would be the steel bar. Well, he didn't anticipate that steel bar being there. We're talking like a 60-yard field goal kick, bang, and you just heard the bone on metal, and he would turn around and he'd just look at all of us. We'd be like, I think he broke his leg, but he would never show it. So yeah, he was a very kind, wonderful, wonderful human being, and I loved him,
There is something to that, I think, that is lost in today's world a little bit of, that coach who is tough on you, and yet when you go out to play the game, or in your case, play the round, it's almost like this safe haven, right? And you do want to do well for that man, that woman who's leading your team, and you can't really talk. It doesn't seem like we can talk that way for the most part. And there's a balance, right? There's a balance between being too hard and coddling, but
he knew, I think, what I needed, and there'd be other players, he would treat them differently, I guess you could say. He couldn't do it this way with that person, and that was the beauty of the art of that, I think, of him too. He was tough, but he was tougher on others, and yeah, today you have to, it's different times. There's still probably similarities. Kids need the tough love, right? And others don't. So he would recruit players, I think, because of that as well. He wanted players that would have respect, wanted to get better, and that really cared, to that.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few guys that were on that Arnold Palmer scholarship, of course, and Wake Forest continues to produce great golfers. What was it about that particular scholarship? I mean, Arnold Palmer is the man. And how was that different than being on a athletic scholarship at Wake Forest?
Yeah, I think, well, Arnold, there was one scholarship he gave every 4 years. So if you got that, that was the one, he gave. There weren't a lot of them. I think that was probably the biggest one in the country at the time. That's the one you wanted. It connected you with the king too,
Mm-hmm.
You knew him. You got to know him, and he was very gracious. He'd come to the school every year for a pro-am that we had, and yeah, I suppose it was quite an honor, right? And I actually moved to Bay Hill when I turned pro, and that's where Arnie was, right? I'm going close to Arnie,
Yeah. Do you remember your first professional round with Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, I was an amateur. I was playing at Baltusrol in the U.S. Open. And I actually finished like 15th. It was a great week for me. And yeah, we played a practice round together. And he was great, He would get a little upset with me because I changed my swing here and there. He was always the guy, swing your swing, right? And I'd ask him, "Arnie, what do you think about this? What do you think about that?" He'd look at me like, "What are you talking about?" He was more of a, you know what to do. Play your game, doggone it.
Well, Gary, that sounds like something I would do, standing on the range, change my swing a little bit every day. But you're making me feel good about myself today.
Well, we all do that. You think about business, your business, you go down one road and you go down that road and you think this is the way it's going to be. And you kind of have to change and bend and, with situations, and golf's that way too. Equipment changes, right? I was wooden clubs. That's what I played with. Now metal clubs come into play. Did I need to change my swing? No, but I had to really work to get that club to perform like my wooden club. When I say that, the right spin, the right loft, the right shaft, and I had a wooden club for years and years and years. That was my baby. In fact, I'd come home at night, I'd spray that lemon wax on it. I would buff the top of it, and it was a piece of furniture. So yeah, changing with the times, changing. Some guys don't change anything. I tended to probably tinker too much personally.
Well, I've had the privilege of spending time with you on the golf course, and even caddying for you at an event last year, a couple events last year, and being around some of the longtime professionals that are some of the best the game has ever seen, and they would walk by and praise your swing as one of the best they'd ever seen. So whether you tinkered or not, obviously they still felt like what you'd accomplished and your ability as a golfer was second to none. And so back in, I guess it was 1983, you won your first event. You were a rookie that year, the Andy Williams Open. What was life like for you after that event, or as you were coming up that last hole, finishing that golf tournament, realizing you were going to win? How did your life change after that?
Yeah, well, I was rookie of the year in '80, so really it was 3 years later. Yeah, so I was. I came to that last hole, made a 12-footer downhill to win, and it was. How did it change? Well, I was exempt. Moving forward. Back then, it was top 60 were exempt. Everybody else had to qualify on Monday, so it was a very, very tight group. Yeah, it was. I won $54,000, so I basically was rich. I think I bought my mom a car, and I just was, felt like I was set, right? And so the exemption was big. I met Andy Williams, was the tournament guy there, and he goes, "Okay, Gary," he says, "where are you staying next week for the LA Open?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I've got plenty of money now to get a nice hotel room, And he said, "Oh no, you have to stay with my good pal Pierre Cassette. He started the Grammy Awards, and I'm going to tell him you're going to stay with him. You call him. Here's his number." So I called him up and went up to LA. Here I'm a kid from Chicago. I'm in Los Angeles. Like, wow, check this out. It's LA. It's celebrities and all the stuff going on. So I knocked on his door, went in. "Hey, Gary, great tournament. We were watching you here. Fantastic." This was probably 4 or 5 hours after I'd finished my round, and I go in this guy's house, and they're having a dinner party there, and they all clap for me, like, wow, this is like, pretty cool, right? And I sit down, and the guy's sitting right across from me, and I'm looking at him, and I go, "Are you from Illinois? Are you from Chicago?" He goes, No, I'm not." I go, "Do you know my mom and dad? You look really familiar." He says, "Well, my name's Joe Namath." Joe. I couldn't believe it. So I met these like famous people. I'm like, holy cow, you just golf. I got into golf because, for a number of reasons. My parents got me into it because golfers don't swear. That's one of the big reasons. But isn't that funny? And they're immigrants from Sweden, so they came over, got me a golf club, and but it could have been anything. It could have been I don't know, it wouldn't have been a computer, but it was something that I really loved. It just happens that it became so popular, and now think about golf. If I would have done something else, we wouldn't be doing this podcast. I'd be a bricklayer or something like that in Chicago. But yeah, it's I suppose lucky, whatever you want to call it, timing. I think everything we do. There's timing, there's luck involved, there's the fork in the road. You took the right fork, and I just ended up very fortunate, to play golf, right?
And you talk about all the people the way golf connects people, and the number of people you've met from a business standpoint. I think we played a couple rounds together in that particular pro-am event at my club, and just got connected that way. And you casually started asking about what our company does, and then over time asking more and more, and all of the 40 plus, you can correct me, the number of years you've been playing the game golf professionally. And I think you've won, in almost every decade, at least. You can correct me again on the stat there, but the number of people that that are in the business world, and as we started to talk about our story and what SHARx does and the way it impacts individuals and helps them access the medications they need and helps it from an employer perspective, I think is that fair to say that's one of the things that drew you to SHARx, or what exactly was it for you?
Yeah, no. Well, a number of things. Obviously, helping those with those high maintenance drugs, that don't have the access, and if they do, it's so expensive. People are on, a lot of people are on lots of drugs, and a lot of them are probably not necessary. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but I know my mother-in-law was on 12 different drugs, one for this, one for this, one for this, and they weren't high maintenance drugs. They weren't the ones that were providing. They were other things. So we got her off all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But she still had to have a couple of them. But just meeting you, who you are, your demeanor, and when you explain what you're doing, I just felt like, it was such a good thing. And I wanted to see if I could be a part of that, a positive spoke in the wheel, if you will, to move the needle, to see if I could introduce SHARx to some people that, companies that I know, the people. And it was just to be a part of something that is good, doing good. There's lots of things. I remember I went to a talk by Byron Nelson, and he got called by a sponsor, and they wanted him to sponsor a cigarette company back then. And he said, there's not enough money in the world that, you could pay me to sponsor a cigarette company. Now, back then, even the doctors were promoting cigarettes, right? But he didn't feel good about it. He didn't like that. And I think that's the big thing. When you told me about what you're doing and you shared with me, I feel still very proud to be a part of it. That's such a, it's just a positive. SHARx is very positive, and you guys are all, everybody's just great to be a part of the team.
I thank you for saying that. You've been and continue to be a great ambassador for us, and you were the one that connected us to Steve Jones, and had the opportunity to talk to him last week, and so many influential business people around the country that you've had us on calls with even recently, where they're just blown away by the impact that SHARx can have. And we talk about this rising tides army and this kind of groundswell of people that are saying essentially enough is enough on this, and we have to find a way to address this as a nation, which is really what SHARx is about. And big pharma doesn't like us because of that. Some of the PBMs that make their money on spread pricing don't like it, and it's been a breath of fresh air to connect with you, and the I'd say really innocence with which you and our brand ambassadors approach this, which is, how do we make a difference? We know this isn't right the way things are going right now. So I appreciate everything you've done there for SHARx.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but thank you for this, to be a part of it. I love it.
So I've got a little something here that maybe changed your career for a little bit. So I want to get your take on this here. See if this makes you laugh a little bit here. This kind of hat right here.
That's good.
Any stories to tell about a cap like this?
Yeah, I actually do. That's a fedora, they call that, right? Remember back in the 20s and 30s, if you look at old pictures, everybody had a hat on. It's funny. You look at old golf pictures of Bobby Jones or Ben Hogan, and you look at the gallery, they all had hats. Crazy, all kinds of hats. So, we had the baseball cap, right? Greg Norman, Chichi Rodriguez had a different hat. Greg Norman came up with his hat, and Payne Stewart at that time just started getting into these knickers, right? So I'm playing at the Hartford, and Cromwell, actually, the tournament that I think, what's it called now? I can't recall, but it's up there in Hartford at TPC. Well, I shoot a bad third round, and I'm downtown in Hartford, and I go by this hat shop, and I look, and I go in there, and the lady there said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, you got all these hats here. I'd like to, check out a few hats. I had time to kill." I tried on like 30 hats, and I put that hat you just had there on, that fedora, and she goes, "Oh, that's you right there. That is your hat. You have to wear that hat."
I gotta let you finish the story with this hat on, I guess.
Yeah, you have to wear that hat. I said, "Okay." So I bought the hat, and I said, "I'm going to play golf with this hat tomorrow. I don't know. I'm just going to go to the course and play." So I come out of the locker room, like walking down to the putting green. The first guy I see is Greg Norman and his caddy. There's about 20 players putting on the putting green, and Norman yells out, "Hey, Hallberg, what do we got, Al Capone here or something?" And everybody laughs, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm like you, Greg, I'm trying this hat on here, see if it works. I need something right now. Not playing that great. Missed the last 2 cuts. I'm thinking the hat could be the difference." So I go out, par 71. There's no reason why I should be playing really good this day. I'm not playing well for months. I am 10 under par after 16 holes.
Wow.
I got a chance to break 60, and I think it would have been the second sub 60 round ever shot, right? And 2 holes to go. Well, I choked. I bogeyed both holes,
Oh, no.
I'm like, man, this hat. Wow. I'm taking the hat, right? So then I go to the Masters, and I almost win the Masters. I go the Players Championship before that, finish 4th. Now I'm on TV every week with this hat. And so you go to the tournaments, Payne has his Snickers, I got my hat, and it was always a little article in the newspaper. So it became very popular really quick. In fact, Bill Nordstrom, or Jim Nordstrom, and Bill Dillard, the big department stores, they were interested to have them in all their stores. And every pro shop I went into, they're like, "Gary, how can I get those hats? People want these hats." So I was with IMG, and they said, "Oh, you don't want to be in the hat business, Gary. You just go play golf. We'll get you a hat deal." And so they gave me a little hat deal, and within 6 months they were in every pro shop. Now when I go in pro shops, they're in the pro shops. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, I started that hat," and they look at me like, "Yeah, right, old man. Just here, go get a sleeve of balls and just go play."
Yeah, right. So the royalties would have been nice on that one, right? So that's a really cool story. I recall seeing some videos of you playing in the Masters and seeing you with that hat on. And quite honestly, I watched golf all the time as a young man, a young teenager. And I remember you playing vividly in that, I remember you playing in that hat and whatnot. And so did you ever play around the golf with Palmer and Nicklaus?
Together? Oh, yeah. Yeah, practice rounds. You see, I would go up to guys, and I'd say, "Hey, you playing this afternoon? Playing this morning? Can I join you guys?" And that's how I wanted to play with the best players.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the player that won the week before or 2 weeks before, I go up to him, "Hey, you want to play? You want to play practice round?" And what it did for me early in my career was I played with them, but I thought, you know what? I'm as good as them, I can play with these guys. And I think that was the biggest take back, was to say, you know what? I hit the ball the same, maybe farther. I hit it straight, I make putts, I do everything. The one thing that I probably didn't have that they had, obviously they were very consistent, unbelievable golfers. And I believed I was that too, but the confidence and the no fear. I had a lot of fear, I think, when I was playing. There was water out there, an OB over there. I'm like, "Can I maybe skip this hole? Just give me a double. We'll go to the next one." I would get nervous. And so that's when I started going to sports psychologists to help me with that fear, I played with John Daly a couple of years ago. It was probably 5-6 years ago, and he just got on the Champions Tour. And there was a really tight hole. I mean, it was a scary hole to me. And I say scary because you're in 8th place, and if you make a bogey, you go to 14th place and top 10. I don't know all that stuff, expectations. Well, after we teed off, I go, man, John, was that a scary tee shot or what? He looks at me. He goes, excuse me? I go, well, it was kind of a scary tee shot, I thought. Gary, you got to understand something. I don't have fear in my life. You got that? I have no fear. I don't get afraid of anything. Oh, okay. That was cool, and it was a lesson for me, that fear is very powerful,
That's a great story to me. I really relate to that, especially as it concerns sharks. And we face challenges, and we face big pharma coming at us at times, and we really do our best to surround ourselves with people who say, we're trying to accomplish something bigger than ourselves. And how do you influence the pricing of prescription drugs in this country, because it's so wildly out of whack? It's talk about it all the time, but Americans pay 400% more for drugs than the rest of the world. But so it seems like that element of the mental element is as big a part as anything, because as I said, I've been around many of the guys that talk about how gifted you were and still are physically. I play with you, still hit the ball 290 yards off the tee, and I've seen you shoot 5 or 6 under. I've been with you when you've done it, and it looks like you're barely trying. And so it's got to be just that mental aspect, right? That is the difference between the guys who are good, still great golfers, but have the great success on tour.
Yeah, Fuzzy Zoller said it beautifully. We were playing somewhere, and you look on the range, you go down the range, and you go, wow, they're all great, right? I mean, you can go to the driving range and at the pro tournament, and you go, wow, they're all the same, right? And Fuzzy said, yeah, they're not all the same. He said, when that pin's tucked up against the water there, and it's on the left side, and the wind's blowing towards the water, and the guys the champions, they just take it on. They're just going right at that flag and try and cut it in there. The others, they're aiming right at the green, and they're sculling it over into that bunker. I'm not going in the water, So yeah, they have the same swing, the same talents, all these things. But yeah, that's a big deal. Big deal.
You won multiple times on tour, and you had, at least I think by the count I've seen, 38 top 10 finishes in your career, and won on multiple tours. And the times you won, do you feel like you were in a different zone in those weeks? And were the times that you had a top 10 and maybe you were close to winning, like I know you led the Masters at like maybe even after 36 holes or close to it. What do you think the difference was? Was it that mental edge those 4 days, or what clicked?
Yeah, I have reflected many times. I had a 4-shot lead at the Masters after 46 holes, 45 holes, which was a substantial lead, But I think the really good tournaments, I kind of lucked into a routine, call it a superstition.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 3 under after 5 the first day, and I got behind the ball, I looked, I took 4 steps in, I set the club down, I made my swing. And then I go, well, you know what? I'm going to do that next time too. And instead of developing a routine that you have, even kids that are 10 years old have routines now. I didn't even know what a routine is most of my career. I just kind of fell into it here and there. So I think that's a big thing, having a routine that you're comfortable with, that fits your personality, and you just stay with that. You look at the kids today, how they talk about, I say kids, they're professionals, but to me, they're very young. But I think they get into a routine, they stick with that routine, and that keeps your mind off all the negative, elements, internal and external. External can be, the wind and the pin placement and the water and the sounds, and the internal is, you know, oh my gosh, I better not bogey this hole, whatever you say in your results. Yeah,
I
that's
got bills to pay, and what if I miss this shot, and all the things we say as amateurs that, whether I make a putt or hit a fairway really doesn't matter at all. But it's
Another thing too, sometimes you're playing well, but you don't allow yourself to go after it. Your targets are still wide when you were playing bad. So you're going along, things aren't going well. You have this very broad look. There's no specifics to it. Then you start playing really well, but you still have that, so you've got to kind of marry that, know when you're playing well and to bring your targets in, and know when you're not playing well, and don't put pressure on yourself to have those real tight targets. Relax them a little bit, so there's always that kind of ebb and flow going on. And that's an art form too, to be aware of those kinds of things. I wish I could talk to some young players and help them with these little things, but young players, they have their own world, and I feel like I could help some kids, with golf. Kind of a funny story. I was playing with George Brett, the great hitter, like one of the best swings and best hitters all time in baseball. So
right.
George was retired, and I actually was lucky enough to play golf with him one time. So George goes, I say, George, all right, you're retired now. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, last year I was the hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals. I said, oh my gosh, how good is that? I'm thinking, hey, did you win the World Series? He goes, and guess how many players asked me or came to me and asked me for a tip? Yeah, just guess how many. I go, I guess all of them. I don't know. He goes, 0. They have their own hitting coaches. They got their own world. They stick to their programs. And I suppose when you're young, we're all a little bit like that, right? And but he couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it either. It'd be fun to help young players with stuff,
Yeah, I have a hard time relating to that, because even as I grew up, the advice I got was, find somebody who's been successful in a way that you would love to model, or you love how it was modeled, ethically and socially, and find out how they did what they did. And you don't necessarily have to try to reinvent the wheel. I mean, you still be you, and it does seem like that's lost a little bit, and it's kind of a shame, right? Because there's so much to glean and so much that we can pass on, or just pay it forward idea, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Listen, if you find one little nugget in there, take it. You don't have to take the whole pie, right? You just, ask people questions. What do you think here? How did that go? How did you get there? And, you take one piece here, one piece there. It can be very positive.
So back in Chicago, you had some connection, and I mean, you were. I'm not sure. You're one of the most notable golfers to ever come out of Chicago, and they had some connection for some time, like with the Cubs and some of the players there back in the day, right? And as we start to wrap up here, what transpired there, and is there any connection still today?
I'll just say this. So my dad told me one time, I said, Dad, where should I go? Where should I spend my time, in my life? You've had a long life here, and, I'm still, going, and where should I go? And I'm thinking he's going to say, move to Florida, warm down there or something like that. But he didn't. He said, you go where you're appreciated. That's where you go. And I grew up here. I had my great golfing experiences here, and know a lot of people here in Chicago area, and I feel appreciated. Played a lot of charity events in my career. It is really, truly my home, right? My families are all still here. I moved out of here, moved to Florida, moved to California, moved to Arizona, moved to ultimately Colorado. Yeah, it's had a big impact on my life, in many ways. Golf, and great sports town, the Cubs. I got to play golf with guys like Stan Mikita, Blackhawks, Ernie Banks, right? The Cubs, Jim McMahon, with the Bears, Michael Jordan. I play with all those guys, which is kind of crazy, you think about that. It's golf because of golf, just golf. Everybody loves golf. And
What's it like playing with Michael Jordan?
first of all, that guy's got a memory like you can't believe. It's incredible. He remembers things like, first of all, remember me after 20 some years. I walk up to him, he goes, "Hey, GH, what's going on?" I'm like, "Really?"
All the people he must run into and know, right? Yeah.
He wears the zone, like a jacket. He's in the moment. You talk to him, he's looking right at you. He's focused, and you think he would be that guy looking around while you're talking to him. Oh yeah, no, I got you, but he's very focused and a wonderful, wonderful guy. Yeah.
He likes to bet as much as it seems, and the reputation when he's on the golf course.
He likes to have a little action, and yeah, he likes to have a game where he can, rub it in and beat you. And he's very competitive. He makes those 6-footers, they're for par, pretty often.
That big cigar hanging out of his mouth.
He's a good player, to be a basketball player, and as big as he is and strong as he is, to be that good is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. It's really been great for me to get to know you. You're such a kind, genuine gentleman, so well respected in the game and everywhere I've had the privilege of going with you, whether traveling to a Pro-Am event or going into a business meeting and meeting with some of the professionals, the CEOs, the CFOs that we meet with. You are well loved, well respected, well appreciated, and we feel fortunate to have you on our team, on the Rising Tides team, and as a brand ambassador for SHARx.
Well, thanks, Corey, you and the whole team, Paul, and everybody else for allowing me this privilege. I just love it. Look forward to great successes, many more.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your stories today. Look forward to hopefully doing it again real soon, and enjoy the rest of your stay in Chicago.
Great. Take care,
Thanks,
Corey.
Gary. Yeah, have a good one.